Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we got a nice update. We got a new commander entering the game soon. It's a leadership commander, and bro, this is a crazy commander for multiple purposes actually. And I will go over pretty much all of them and explain a lot of ideas on commander pairings because it's very versatile. First, let's go over the active skill. Rage cost 1000, target type AoE, always good. For the next 2 seconds, up to 5 nearby allied or friendly troops, including this commander troop, take 10% less damage, deal 20% more damage. But if this effect of skill are multiplied by 2 for this commander's troops. So if you are the one casting the skill, I think you get like 20% less damage and 40% more damage for the next 2 seconds. So that kind of says, well, it's for 2 seconds. So that is exactly primary commander, 1 turn pause, secondary commander active skill. So your secondary commander active skill will get 40% more all damage, which is pretty crazy, right? But it doesn't really end there. I mean, the other skills are pretty decent too. So the active skill, I mean, there is no damage factor, but it is a pretty overpowered active skill. For sure, if you can imagine that it affects all your 5 marches. Well, of course, you can run 7, but most people run 5. And, well, 10% less damage, 20% more damage on 5 marches, of which one of the marches with this commander has, of course, a bit better buff. That is a crazy buff. It's like the Constantine buff, right? Or debuff. You take less damage, but you also gain more damage. So that is pretty crazy. The second skill, while this commander troop is on the map, cavalry units gain 35% attack, infantry 35 defense, archers 35 health, and your troops gain 20% march speed. So basically always 20% march speed, and whatever unit type you have, you get a stat, 35%. And you think, well, archer, 35% health, that is pretty crazy. So we start imagining 35% health, 20% march speed, and the 40% damage on your second active skill. Who can we put in secondary place? Juge, maybe? I mean, the plain all damage on that active skill ain't bad, right? 2000 damage factor plus like 40%. I'm not gonna lie, that sounds pretty OP. Plus, you get 30% health, plus the 35% health here makes like 65% health. Crazy. You also get some decent march speed, which will definitely help the archers. And if you read the next skill, it doesn't end there. If this commander troop contains 2 different unit types, it gains 50% march speed and 15% less damage. If the troop contains only 1 unit type, it deals 30% more damage. Let that sink in. 30% more all damage? What? On an active skill, that is crazy. And 30% damage on a high damage single target active skill is maybe even crazier. I'm thinking like maybe Nevsky or maybe who else is a high single target, like Scipio Melianus. In order for the active skill here from this guy to work, I mean, you need to have Scipio to be the secondary, but then you lose the silence effect. But still, 30% all damage is crazy. That is crazy because it means like 30% more normal damage, which is counterattack plus basic attack, 30%, and 30% more skill damage, 30% more smite damage, 30% more additional damage, some direct damages too. I mean, I don't know the exact pronunciation of those or the skills, what are they called, but basically 30% flat damage it's crazy, bro. And if you have 2 unit types, you gain some decent march speed on top of your other march speed, so that you get like 35% march speed and some damage reduction, which makes it tanky. So then you're thinking, wait, what? Hero? Can we do a garrison with this? But it's only like 15% damage reduction because the march speed doesn't really count, and the second skill doesn't work either. So I don't think it's gonna be meta in garrison because you need it will only work on field, right? The second skill. So that's already a lot of stats reduced, but you never know, you never know. You also have these 2 skills. Whenever this commander troop launches a basic attack, it has a 10% chance to deal direct damage factor up to 3 nearby enemy troops. damage factor at 800 and reduce their rage by 100. Okay, so that might trigger once every 1.5 skill cycle, which is, I mean, 800 damage factor, AoE, not too bad, right? And the other one, whenever this commander uses their active skill, they have a 40% chance to use their active skill a second time. Whenever the other commander in their troop uses their active skill, they have a 20% chance to use their active skill a second time. Okay, let me explain what this means, because this is broken. It can only trigger once every 7 seconds, which is basically once every skill cycle. Although, well, it can trigger for both the active skills that you use. But let me put it in this way. You activate your first active skill, okay? So boom, for 2 seconds you get the 40% all damage and 20% damage reduction. And then the next 2 seconds, so after those 2 seconds, boom, you trigger in basically the third turn. So the first turn you trigger the first active skill, in the third turn you trigger this one because there's always one turn of cooldown. And then you get another 2 seconds worth of all damage and damage reduction. So basically it makes the active skill last 2 seconds longer. And that means 2 seconds later, you get your next active skill from the secondary commander, right? And well, that doesn't trigger another time because of that cooldown. You know, there was a 7 second cooldown, so that doesn't work in that way. But I mean, you still get the all damage on your active skill from the secondary commander, and you generally just generate 40% more damage, normal damage basically too. And counterattack too. So if this skill get triggered on a primary commander for 4 seconds, you deal like 40% extra counterattack plus 40% normal damage and 40% skill damage or smite damage, you know. And 40% counterattack is quite a lot. And remember, you also deal the 30% all damage if you use one troop type. So that is 70% all damage? What? Okay, that is pretty legit, right? I'm thinking, wait a minute. If we want some juicy active skill costs, why don't we use Joan? And I wonder how that works, because you have a 20% chance to do the skill of Joan again. So does that mean Joan can get 3 active skills in one skill cycle? What? Okay, so that skill from Joan is already pretty decent. I mean, you're getting a 2000 damage factor to 3 target troops, and you deal 5% more damage for the next 3 seconds, and you gain 20 rage per second. So if that triggers already 2 times because of that skill, I'll show you. Yeah, like here, you can see when you max it, there's a 100% chance you use it again. So, bro, you know that means that you already use it twice, so you can use it thrice? Oh, what? But the one from the primary cannot activate this skill, right? I mean, then you can trigger 4 Joan skills. No, that would be like crazy if they can trigger themselves. I don't think so. That this shouldn't work like that. But I think you can activate it 3 times. So there is a 20% chance that first you have, of course, the active skill, 40% all damage, 20% damage reduction. And then there is a 20% chance that you get 3 Joan of Arc's active skills, which is a triple AoE 2000 damage vector. Um, that is kinda OP. I mean, you got a nice rage engine. I mean, you trigger this in turn 3, 5, and 7, and it lasts for 3 seconds, so all the way up to turn 10. So for basically turn 3 till turn 10, you get rage 20 rage per second. And I think at rage turn 10, you already activate your active skill from the first guy. I think it's Philip. You activate that skill already again. So you get the all damage again. So That is pretty crazy, isn't it? I mean, you get 20%, 20 rage per turn for basically all the turns. Okay, okay, let that sink in. Joan, baby, maybe Joan is back? Well, she never left, but some people doubted her, right? But she is. I think this is a legit pairing, maybe. You get that 35% attack too, right? So it's more damage. Ah, okay, okay, interesting. So what about them other leadership commanders? What if we use leadership commanders? Two with each other. So we can use like Honda. You get that 2500 active skill, so Honda has to be primary here. Um, and, well, there's a 20% chance that you trigger that active skill once again, which is never a really bad idea. And you get some attack, some march speed, some extra march speed, of course, from the skill from Philip. I think this combination could be pretty decent. I mean, you also get stats, right? If you decide to run it with all troops, you gain 35% attack, defense, health for your specifically troop types, like infantry against the defense, cav against the attack, and so forth. You gotta use it with multiple troop types, I think, because like Honda requires you to use more, right? So I don't know if this is the play. I mean, Honda focuses a lot of skill damage, right? It's you get skill damage bonus, but the active skill from Philip doesn't deal any skill damage, so there's not much synergy there. But of course, there is a multi-troop type synergy, so maybe that's something interesting. I don't really think this is gonna be the meta play. Well, let's talk about Trajan. Active skill, you gain like 40 rage per second, skill damage bonus 25%, and your allies too, right? 5 allied troops, and they deal the damage factor. But your allies deal 25% more skill damage and gain like 50 rage per second if you use the expertise. There you go. For the next 3 seconds, you gain 30% more skill damage, 50 rage per second, and you also wait, this commander takes more damage. Ah, okay. I mean, you get 20% health, 20% defense most of the time. Well, outside the territory, you gain the health. So that is decent. I am thinking that is gonna be pretty tanky too. I mean, you get the damage reduction if you use multiple troop types on the other guy, Philip, and you get their active skill with damage reduction. So it's pretty tanky too. Then you have a nice buff here for what is he called, Trajan. You get the damage taken increase to the target, which is never bad. So if you run like 5, 6, 7 marches, the target is gonna get 20% damage increase, but you also got the active skill from your own commander, so you get like 20% all damage for a couple of turns, and the damage reduction on pretty much all your marches. And here you get also 25% skill damage or 30% skill damage from Trajan, and you get some other pretty nutty stats. So, that is interesting. Maybe Trajan Renaissance, maybe revival. Maybe they will use Trajan again with this new guy to just buff their marches. Let's talk some more field marches. What about Huo? I mean, we get that 30% all damage and 35% attack if we just use cavalry only on this guy. And 2700 damage factor with a 30% all damage bonus. I mean, that doesn't sound bad to me, is it? And for sure, if you can imagine that there is a 20% chance that Huo activates their skill once again. So 2700 two times, which is pretty crazy in my opinion. You also get the damage reduction, you get some extra buffs, all damage buffs. It doesn't trigger in Huo's active skill because he has to be the primary. But, I mean, could be pretty legit, right? I mean, there is a rage reduction on Huo's active skill in one of his skills. I forgot which one it was. I think the fourth. So yeah, that looks pretty legit. I mean, it makes Huo a bit more tanky. I mean, Huo really needs that tankiness, right? And, well, you can deal AoE damage, 10% chance, which is always nice on Huo because he doesn't deal with AoE, so makes it a bit more versatile, maybe. What about Shahar? I mean, there is 35% health, plus 30% health for archers on that one guy, Philip. 35 plus 35 makes 70% health, which is just nuts. But it doesn't end there. I mean, your active skill is a 2800 damage active skill. Remember, this is only if you use her as a primary, but the 30% plain all damage from this new guy, I mean, doesn't look bad, right? You get 20% march speed, you get some AoE damage, you get the tankiness, which, I mean, she is already pretty tanky. I mean, 30% on a 2800 active skill sounds pretty legit to me, is it? And this skill says you already take 10% less damage while on the map, but I think if you upgrade it's like 20% all damage reduction on the map. So it is just really, really tanky. Let's see, I think I screenshot that as well. So yeah, it says 20%. So that is crazy to me. That combination could work. One of the field pairs that I find really interesting. Need more research. So I was thinking rallies. What about rallies? I mean, Scipio Aemilianus, 2700 smite damage factor, 20% damage increase to the target for 3 seconds. I mean, doesn't really matter in this case, but hey, that sounds legit. 30% all damage, not bad. You gain 30% health here as well if you lead a rally attack. Plus, you get the 35% defense from Philip, right? So that is free stats. So then the third active skill, it says 30% chance to dispel all debuffs, like health, defense debuffs. You gain immunity for the debuffs, 25% less normal damage taken. And, well, the pretty decent active skill, or passive skill, what am I saying? And the most important part was, well, you have to use it as a primary, otherwise you don't have the silence. But I think you can give up the silence and just try to put him secondary. I mean, I'm gonna run some tests with this as a secondary if I can max him. But I'll wait this time. I want some reports first because, well, I don't want to max any random commander. But, well, you also gain 40% rage faster if you use active skills. And remember, with this new guy, there is a 40% plus a 20% chance in one turn or in one skill cycle that you will indeed activate an active skill. So you get in, well, usually you get 3 active skills in one cycle in some cases, right? Meaning for 6 turns you gain 40% rage faster. 2 times 3 is 6, right? Okay, that is interesting, Commander. Fast rage cycle, interesting combination there. We also got them archer rallies. I mean, you get all damage bonus to your active skill from Ashur. 5 enemy targets. I don't know, man. People were saying Ashur is gonna be meta with this guy. I mean, yeah, you get 30% health, which is what Ashur lacks, by the way. Ashur has the defense and the attack, so I think maybe that's true. I mean, it makes it more tanky. Ashur isn't that tanky, and you get like 30% more damage, so you deal a ton more damage, which will, of course, help. We have another archer rally, by the way. My guy here is called Henry V, and it also lacks health stats. And maybe you can remember, his active skill deals a pretty big amount of damage, right? So that 30% damage also applies there, which is not a bad sign. And I don't think Henry has to be the primary, correct? So maybe this is one of the legit pairings that we could use. I don't know. We also have another infantry rally, by the way. There is this guy, Tariq ibn Ziyad. You get a 2500 damage factor with an extra case. So sometimes you have the, if you're swarmed, you deal the extra 900 damage factor, which is not too bad. And 30% damage also applies there. It's a high target. And you also have a big rage reduction on the 4th skill of Tariq. 80 rage per second for 3 seconds, 10% chance to trigger. So you make the rage difference, well, bigger, right? So this is an interesting combination. And remember, there is also rage reduction on Philip. So this pairing might actually reduce some nice rage every troop, skill cycle. 10% chance, 100 rage, and 10% chance, 80 times 3 rage. So if they both trigger somewhere in a skill cycle, you can reduce someone rage by, I don't know how many, like 80, 80, 160, 240, 340. I mean, you gotta be lucky and they should not trigger in the same turns, but I mean, you get a nice rate reduction tank here. So that is an interesting combination. The reason why I talked about this combination and just rallies in general is because all these skills work on the map, which is for rallies too. Just the secondary skill is the stat skill. That one doesn't work on the map. Doesn't work on the map, but doesn't work in the garrison, right? So even for garrisons, maybe this is something to think about. But I think, well, you kind of want a primary to get the advantage of the buff. But I don't know if that is beneficial. I think there is he's mainly gonna be rally or field. I think you can use him in a rally. But we gotta figure out, we gotta see some test reports. I think for the field, it is gonna be a must have, honestly. If you run 5, 6, 7 marches, it's simply needed. That active skill gives you the 20% all damage and 10% damage reduction on 5 marches for 2 seconds, which is, in my opinion, quite good to have. For sure, if it triggers it once again, every in a while, you do trigger it twice, right? So, hey, I mean, it is pretty decent. And I forgot to mention, there is another reason why this is gonna be pretty OP. Because remember, there is one new formation, or one formation that people kind of overlook. I announced to you the new meta formation, Icon formation. Why? Because, well, your buffs are multiplied by 1.2%, up to a maximum increase of 5% of their original value. So let's do the calculations. 1.2 times 30% more skill damage. So 1.2, I need a calculator for this, but I think it is 6%, right? Yeah, so 36% more skill damage on the active skill. That's not the only one. This is way more important. There is 12% less damage and 24% more damage instead of 10 and 20. So that's basically 6% more damage or damage reduction. That is pretty decent. I mean, it's not that much, you would say, but it's okay. Wait a minute. I said 36, but it's 35 because of that 5% max rule. But yeah, it focused on all damage, which is the best buff, of course, you can get, or damage reduction, or skill damage. Let's look at the legendary armaments. I mean, you have 5% skill damage resistance, a 10% chance to reduce the damage by 15%, and gain a 20% bonus to march for 3 seconds if you take damage. I mean, that's kind of okay. I mean, cool. Another one, 5% boost to rage recovery speed, so 5% more rage. And whenever you launch a basic attack, 10% chance to increase the attack up to 3 nearby allied troops, not including itself, by 15%. For 3 of your 5 marches, excluding this one, you gain 15% attack. That is a decent buff. And the wielder troops gain 5% skill damage resistance, or counter attack damage resistance. And whenever the wielder buffs a friendly target other than themselves, the target immediately gains 25% rage, or 25 rage, not percent. Each target can only trigger this once every turn. So if we have the Trajan plus this guy, or vice versa, also true, also possible, it means that all your marches in one skill cycle will always get 50 rage, 2 times 25, and there is a chance that you trigger another active skill, so all your marches gain 75 rage in some of skill cycles, which is, I mean, that doesn't sound bad. 75 rage times 5 marches, that is like 375. The total rage for all your fourth marches. I mean, that doesn't sound bad at all. I think you should definitely do this. Sure, you can also install war drums to gain even more rage for your other troops. Um, that sounds interesting. So, if you're gonna do a buffing march, please use this formation. And if you get those golden armaments, mainly the one, the third one that I showed you, that might be really interesting. And also remember, you can also use it with Mulan, I think. But I don't know if you should use Mulan in the field. Is it a... No, I don't think she's gonna be good in the field. But you never know. Maybe that's something interesting to research as well, a Mulan combination. And well, there is of course Golden, no, what is it called? Sunset Canyon. Maybe this is the shit in Sunset Canyon. Well, to conclude what we have talked about in this video, we got a bunch of commander pairings that are very interesting, and I think my conclusion in general is that this commander is, I think, a must-have if you have 4 or 5 marches already, and yeah, it's gonna make your lineup much stronger. For sure, if you have that one legendary inscription and a nice excellent formation, I think it's gonna be very, very good. So well, I look forward for this commander and I might max him, but I want some reports first. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something new today. And if you did, please consider joining Discord. We talk about the pairings there as well. And well, it's just a fun environment. Well, I love to see you there. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.